Raise your hand if you can see, you were able to see the reinforcement contingency, the holding pattern. Raise your hand. Anybody not able to see how it reinforces itself? Wasn't able to see how one domino hit the next in order to reconfirm the original one at 12 o'clock? Anyone not able to do that? Okay. What's that like for you? To have done this exercise and to see what you're seeing, what you're looking at on that page. What's it like? Uncomfortable? Anybody else? Huh? How painful? Scale of 1 to 10. Huh? It's deep. Yeah. I did a great job with you guys, didn't I? Very painful. I'm a disappointment in myself. Shit, we had a great retreat with Miles. Let's invite that bloke back. Okay. Did we do a good job doing a chicken nugget? This is your chicken nugget moment. Honestly, like, this is your chicken nugget moment. This is when you go, oh shit, that's why. Something like that. That's how. That's why. Again and again and again, I've been feeling this way. That's why. That's how. Of course, this is a simple exercise done in one afternoon, probably with just one thread. If you did your cause and effect, you probably followed one thread, but it is likely that there are several very strong ones that you have going on in the same way. And sometimes you're clear about different dominoes and less clear about others. And so if you do this, keep doing this exercise, you might be able to connect the dots with even greater clarity and specificity. Like, I think we are much more aware of 6 o'clock. Was that your experience? Three o'clock, was that your experience? Which one? Which of the first three were easier to identify? 3? Huh? 12. 12 was easiest?
I found 9 and 12 overlapped.
9 and 12 overlapped a lot. Mm-hmm. I'd love to know what they were, but I won't ask because that'll put people on the spot, and then, you know, you're British. When you get to 6, usually there's a big, massive amount of information because they're the most obvious, they're the outward ones, and we have all kinds of little intricate survival strategies for coping. But then usually the emotions is like do you guys have Neapolitan ice cream here? Chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry? You know, so usually there's some variation on shame, anger, and something else, sadness or something like that. Those are your karmic Neapolitan delights. And then, to be honest, with the people that I've worked with over the years, the main one is I am unworthy, I am unlovable. Some variant on that, some sense of deficiency. So, some variant of deficiency. So then, as a culture, if our main, I mean, is that true? Some variant of deficiency for you around 12 o'clock? So then, as a culture that feels so utterly deficient, if we jump into the wisdom teachings and go straight to selflessness, do you think it's appropriate? It may be, because at least it will loosen your fixation on the fact that you feel deficient, right? So I'm not saying it's not an appropriate route. I'm just saying that it may be easier to develop some of the other maturation skills in the Lam Rim if there's greater, as a prerequisite, greater dignity, a greater sense of dignity. Not pride, dignity, self-love. And so there's one article that I wrote that is on the website, is Self-care versus selflessness, a contradiction, question mark. Because often people ask me that are very steeped in Dharma, isn't self-care just reinforcing the self? Isn't the whole mission about overcoming the self? Isn't it about destroying the ego, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? I have absolutely no contradiction between self-care and selflessness. One is an attitude of embracing love, but not only directed outwardly, but directly inwardly. Whereas selflessness is about a habit of consolidation or reification. So there's no problem with the self. There's no problem with the self. Yeah.
Well, as he talks about what he sometimes explains three parts. For example, in terms of the wisdom book, where he talks about cognitive balance.
Mm-hmm.
That's how he actually approaches the teachings on selflessness.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty much what you're trying to say.
What I'm saying is what I think the Buddha was pointing to with selflessness is not to destroy the self, but to undermine the mind's ability to reify. Have you heard this word, reify? Is to make more real than it actually is. It's an instinctual habit to solidify something. So there is a self. There needs to be a self from a psychological point of view. You have to have an ego, because that's what mitigates the impulses with the external environment. There's some mediating force or variable that manages the inside against the outside. And yours is different from mine, and we would call that yourself. And yourself is also an expression. It's unique to you based on your outcomes and your ambitions and how you present yourself and your likes and dislikes. That's how you manifest in the world. Like the Dalai Lama's, the 14th is different from the 13th, absolutely. And the Dalai Lama has a particular personality, and there's no problem with it. Apparently he likes watches and like breaking things down, cars and things. He's got an engineering mind, apparently. No problem with the self. It should be loved just as much as you should love the self in somebody else. But it's the instinct to make it solid. That's what is meant by selflessness. The teaching on selflessness is to appreciate the actual reality, which is more fluid. Once you understand the fluidity, then you can enjoy yourself. There's no problem with the self. So I think it's so for example, your 3 o'clock shame actually isn't the problem. The more of the problem is that you believe the shame to be the self that's underpinning your life as an unworthy self. Moments of shame are just karmic releases. The problem is that they get solidified as this is who I am. It would be actually okay to allow feelings to arise, even painful ones, unpleasant ones, anger coming, shame coming. They are the human expressions of a full range of human emotions. But the aspect of the mind that clings to them and says, this is who I am, that's what the antidote of wisdom serves to undermine. So the point of this exercise then is to now draw a circle between 3 and 6. In the space or the gap between 3 and 6 is your weakest link. Make sense where they are? Okay, and just write the gap or write please mind the gap right there. You're never going to hear that voice on the train the same way anymore. I actually want to associate this. Every time you're on the bloody tube, I want you to remember this day and this exercise. Agreed? Please mind the gap. So now you have an opportunity to preemptively structure or speak to your future self, your future becoming. What are the causes that are going to create the person that you want to become? And these will be the seeds of your future self. So when you hit your emotion, shame, sadness, anger, anxiety, fear, something like that, your mindfulness commitment is to create a container of awareness that allows you to hold that emotion without reaction. Fair enough? So we're not saying avoid shame, we're not saying avoid anger, we're not saying avoid sadness. We're saying create a very soft container that is willing to endure or embrace or hold or accept that unpleasant feeling. Now, when you're doing that, it can be sometimes helpful to conceive of your feeling as your inner child and as your attention as the new mother. Does that make sense? I will say it again. Yeah, because we're going off the Dharma track and into therapy now. But I'm combining them. Your feeling arising is the karmic fruition, anger, sadness. In your mindfulness laboratory, your mindfulness meditation, that feeling arising can be anthropomorphized or characterized as an inner child in distress. Do you follow that? The awareness that's meeting that moment can be conceived as the parent that you wish you had. Yeah, that's where we're going. So many of us have the experience of a fragmented attunement, which has contributed to the sense of unworthiness. So what is the remedy to hang on the coattails of Geshe Tashi Tsering? It didn't work.
So if I understood the question properly, it was just my experience going to the teacher and
Yeah.
just go like crying.
Yeah. But then if we're going to follow Lama Yeshe's beautiful title to his book, Become Your Own Therapist, how about become your own mother? Become your own parent. Become the parent you wish you had. What if your mindfulness, at least provisionally, to serve as an antidote for such fragmentation in our culture, what if your mindfulness was set up as an opportunity to manifest the kind of parenting you didn't have? What if the internal experience that you experience of distress in the form of anxiety, in the form of anger, in the form of hatred, could be conceived as an inner child that's longing to be attuned to be witnessed and to be mirrored and to be held and to be nurtured? And yes, it's absolutely true, we definitely need external people to perform that initially. And if we didn't get it, we should find them, even if the national health system has to pay for them. No problem. But then we should internalize those qualities of presence, consistent attunement, non-judgmentalness, and love. Presence, attunement, non-judgmentalness, and love. Those qualities, bring those to bear on the wound and on the distress, is like a child seeking a parent's presence, attunement, non-judgmentalness, and love. And when they meet, it's like getting what you couldn't get or didn't get. Do you follow? So that means truly non-judgmentalness means you aren't insisting that this go away. You're just saying, I'll be with you. And like when my kid has a tantrum in the supermarket, I get A, terrified, B, angry, irritated, ashamed, right? And then it dawns on me, he's out of control. He has no way of regulating himself, and I have to just be present, even if it takes 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I just have to be completely present. I cannot add any more fuel to the fire. So the first half of your mindfulness practice is that a level of sensitivity and dedication showing up with your internal environment, the ripening of your karmic effect, the result of your past karmic effect, which there's nothing you can do about except radically accept, as Tara Brach talks about. And in that moment, you become to yourself or to your inner experience the kind of parent you wish you had. This is how you take a little bit from the teacher, but then do it regularly yourself. That's the middle way between getting a few. You get your therapist once a week. You get Geshe Tenzin or Geshe Tashi once a month, and they have that presence. They have that non-judgmentalness. They have that attunement. They have that care or kindness. But then every day in your mindfulness practice, meeting your current experience with these qualities, that's the first half of your meditation. Then the second half is the choices. So you've met 3 with presence, love. I call it presence, love in the book, but they include these attunement, non-judgmentalness, loving kindness. But then for your 6, in the gap, it's best to have some very specific, tangible ways of coping, more healthy coping strategies, more virtuous coping strategies, more virtuous behaviors, actions, ways of talking, ways of speaking, ways of communicating, ways of relating, ways of acting. Think about them. So I actually want you to turn your page over or find a separate page. And you draw a completely new circle. And you have the same 12, 3, 6, and 9. Perception, emotion, action, and response. But now start with an inventory at 6 of the kinds of specific actions that you want to adopt. And work your wheel in the reverse direction, going from 6 to 9 to 12 to 3. Everybody understand? Yeah, you can turn that slide, yeah. 1 forward. Yeah. This slide is missing the world's response, so just imagine that 9 instead of nirvana there. Just imagine that it's the world's response. me. Everybody good? Just for the audio, I'm going to just read through the 10 virtues and their antidotes, okay? So these would be the karmic seeds that lead to unfavorable outcome, and the virtuous seeds that lead to more favorable outcome. Now, these are the translations of Joe Luizzo. So violence leads to traumatic injury, non-violence leads to peace. Stealing or compulsive acquisition leads to scarcity. And that's so interesting, isn't it? Our culture is driven by compulsive acquisition that actually leads or comes to the ripening as a subjective sense of scarcity. Isn't it true if you see people that have more and more and more, they're more protective of what they have? Like when you go to India, they have nothing, but they're more generous, aren't they? Generosity leads to a sense of abundance. Third one, perverse sexuality leads to frustration. A sublimation of sexual needs leads to internal satisfaction. Lying engenders mistrust, honesty engenders trust. Pretty straightforward. What does it feel like to be the recipient of someone who's lying? Slander engenders mistrust also. Tactful speech engenders respect. 6, abusive speech engenders isolation. Very interesting that could be for oneself and others. I don't know about you, but I have a very harsh inner critic. Caring speech engenders leadership. Idle speech or gossip engenders contempt. Meaningful speech engenders authority. Covetous intent results in dissatisfaction. Philanthropic intent results in contentment. Malicious intent results in insecurity. Nonviolent intent results in confidence. And unrealistic views result in confusion, and realistic views result in clarity. Some interesting translations there that I would just share with you. But again, even something like this that you can find in the classic text or the modern text, I don't think are sufficient. I think you have to make your leap from the text to something even more precise for you. Like, I don't think it's enough to leave it as meaningful speech. I don't think it's enough to leave it as nonviolent intent, for example. I think based on your own predisposition and your own circumstances, the more specificity that you can do, the better chance that when push comes to shove, you'll have an option available. Okay, so what was that part of the assignment like for you? Because we're going to run out of time here. Huh? Hard. That was hard also? Hard coming up with the alternatives?
Harder to do the second part of the exercise.
Mm-hmm. Which part was hard?
The second, so the gap, so the one we've just done.
The one that, yeah, and I'm saying, is the hard part, the whole thing is hard, or just coming up with the new behaviors?
It's just coming up with the
The actions? The actions, yeah. Mm-hmm. Is that a common feeling? Second one was harder? It also may be that this is the one we spend the least of time thinking about. Because of the negativity bias and being so stuck in compulsive ruts, we're more sensitive or more attuned to the things that we do wrong and then the things that we can do right.
Does the gap in the kind of cycle freedom involve other people?
Does it involve other people? It can or cannot. So in this version of the slide, I'm sorry, the gap. You're saying the gap.
What am I trying to say? So it's, in this one, because we're sort of starting at 6, like what needs to precede that? That's the beginning of this cycle.
Well, it's just like a chicken and an egg. Where's the starting point? There's no starting point. I'm just starting you at 6 because on the flip, the reverse one, we ended with, it kind of goes like this. You start with 12, 12 leads into 3. Everybody with me? 3 leads into 6, 6 leads into 9, and 9 reinforces 12. That's the first assignment that we did. Then we're saying we're in a moment, and data makes contact, fires association. 12 implicitly is triggered, and because of 12 is implicitly triggered, 3 then comes. But now we're saying with mindful presence, you can catch 3 before 3 goes to 6. Right? So far, so good? Yes? So then recognition is there. Now there's choice. So then we're starting with new seeds, new actions. So you turn the page and you start with the new actions. If you had recognition and you had preemptively determined the kinds of things that you wanted to adopt, you'd start your new cycle with 6. But 6 would still engender a response from others. The response from others would still impact your perception on yourself and your belief about the world. Your belief and perceptions would then fire new emotions. Your new emotions would now become the reinforcement contingencies that select for those new behaviors. Positive emotions are very powerful reinforcements. Like if you have a great time at the gym, you're bound to go back. So if you feel loved, or you feel held, or you feel appreciated, or you feel validated, you feel seen, you feel understood, or you feel a breath of fresh air, or you feel a budding of confidence, then that will begin to grease the wheels of a new reinforcement contingency. Now, the obvious thing that we haven't talked about is in these reinforcement contingencies, you can just substitute one unhealthy self, but still have an attachment to the self. It's just a better one, right? So you still need to have a sense of analysis. You have to have a sense of deconstructive analysis at each turn, but not so much where you are convinced that there's no self, otherwise there'd be no point in doing all of this. Who is your karmic virtue for, if not for your consciousness? It's the evolution of consciousness. So that just becomes silly semantics. I like to throw back soul at people. You have a soul. And then they get all freaked out. What are you talking about? You're a Buddhist. There's anatman and all this. No, the Buddha was talking about no solid self. He was talking about no solid, unchangeable soul. The yogis were saying that there was a soul that was set apart from the world of conditionality, which was unchanging, a permanent sense of self. His insistence on those teachings was not about the self or consciousness or soul or whatever that is. His insistence was there's no permanent, fixed entity there, outside or apart from. So you have a soul. You don't like consciousness, you don't like self, use soul. Most people don't like soul. Consciousness. You're doing this for your consciousness, you're doing this for your evolution, you're doing this for yourself, you're doing it for others. There is continuity. There's just at no point there's nothing fixed. We didn't have time to go through, but this is what the great Tsongkhapa says in his final few lines of the three principal aspects of the path, is that there is finally an integration where once you see dependent origination, you see selflessness. Once you understand that things are being caused, you also see that there at no point can be anything fixed. If you go too far into nothing's fixed, you abandon causality. If you get too reified with causality, you don't see that there's fluidity. It is the mind that can hold both, and actually not only hold both, but see them as one and the same. If I had any competence, I'd be able to do it from memorization, but there is no competence available. But they are beautiful lines, and they're so virtuous. Why don't we end with a couple of lines of Tsongkhapa? Unless any of you have a comment in the meantime. Do you feel after this retreat that you have spent some time worthwhile? Do you feel more empowered to actually put your mindfulness practice into use for you? Huh? Yes, okay. And Sue, be honest with me, it's not what you were expecting, was it?
No.
No.
But I'm pleasantly surprised.
Oh, good.
And I think it's brought a lot of teachings that I have had together.
Well, please share that with everybody. Oh, good.
Because this is so touchable. We have so many amazing teachings in here. Don't understand me wrong. They're amazing, like Geshe Tachi between Geshe-las. But often we just go to the texts and not necessarily touching in a way like you do. This kind of from psychological, from our Western perspective. Different teachers they do sometimes, but this is very awakening. So I'm gonna be happy with some practitioners.
Good, thank you. That's great. Good. I'm glad it is received by some of you as good, because you never know, being a new person invited into a very prestigious place where some very senior teachers have been teaching classical Buddhism, how it's going to be received. I don't think for a second I wasn't a little intimidated by coming here. Oh, thank you. I'm glad I reinforced that. Appearance is invariably relative, and emptiness is devoid of conviction. So long as these two insights dawn separately, you've not realized the true Buddha's intent. But when they appear simultaneously without alteration, from the slightest unbiased insight of relativity, correct knowledge breaks the reification habit, and your search for genuine insight is complete. From then on, all appearances dispel absolutism, and all emptiness eliminates nihilism. Seeing how emptiness dawns as causation, you are no longer blinded by biased views. So once you have realized the vital points of the three principal aspects of the path, resort to solitude and persistent effort, you will quickly reach your timeless goal, my child. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Okay. Any final comments? So you are now bound. I'm going to commit you without having any rice to throw and feathers to don. You are bound by your commitment to renunciation to work your karma wheel in a more favored direction and practice virtue for your own benefit and for others. So we basically put the first stage of the path in your lap and in your palms and made it practical and made it readily accessible for you. Now you have to practice it. And it involves not just sitting down and being quiet with your meditation, but it now also involves seeing things clearly. Like this exercise, I consider a meditation. This is a meditation. This is what I would consider this an analytic meditation, right? The analytic meditation of the traditional context is to turn your mind inwards and do an analysis. But we have just used a writing book and a pad to do an inventory, which is a kind of self-analysis. These are the things that get in my way. These are the things that I would like to adopt. It's Dharma. That is Dharma. That's no question about it. I have no compunction about that. That's Dharma. What we did together today was a group exercise, a meditative analysis, deconstructing your causal process, how you get into a bind. But we also tried to preemptively impregnate in your consciousness some of the virtuous activities you could adopt if you had presence of mind. So then we also did meditation, we did wisdom, and we did ethics. So we have done a full Buddhist, non-secular. Okay? Final comments. I cannot get used to it. Yeah.
You gave us the caveats about choosing that if you're reaching out to somebody or having someone you're back to, about choosing that person.
Yeah.
But that actually takes quite a bit of courage, doesn't it? Because the world's response, as you phrased it, there's no internal control on what that's going to be.
That's right.
So there's a kind of, maybe a bit of courage that's needed.
There definitely needs to be courage, but there also needs to be discernment.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, your name?
Joe.
Joe, you weren't here yesterday, right? So yesterday we were talking about, I had some weird fantasy that the Dharma centers could double as kind of community safe havens for people to have psychological processes with more, it'll take a bit more work with you Brits, but they could have create psychological processing with peer groups who are more mature than the average dysfunctional family system and member of society. A little education, for example, a little community service. In 2 short days, people can be relatively well empowered. You're already well adjusted. Now you get a few courses, and then they become refuges. We don't have to rely on the lamas. We do peer support, and you don't even have to be quick-witted and give a reply. You just have to witness, sit in dyads, someone shares something. I do these wonderful workshops, if we have another chance in the future, on Tonglen. Tonglen, where you actually don't just do it visually, but you allow someone to say, I'm having a really shit time, I'm feeling thrown out by my wife, I'm thinking about using again, or whatever, and you hold that, and you create tolerance for it. In the same way that I discussed you creating tolerance for your own situation and meeting your distress like a parent and child. Now you become the parent for someone else, but you don't have to be trained therapist. You don't, because you're not going to give a reply. You're just going to hold it and stay strong with them. And you're going to exchange your sense of ease with their sense of distress. You're going to give and take. And then you would change, or you would mix it up in some way. But all I'm saying is it's just our society is so fragmented that I see this needing to happen so that people can make better choices. They have actual places and people to go to that are not superhuman, not even trained professionals, but just average Joe and average Jane and average Mike that are decent enough, mature enough, and have enough presence of mind to be able to bear the burden of history, of a legacy of fragmentation and lack of attunement. I mean, I think we are underestimating the value of attunement as a medicine because we don't have any left and no presence left. So if you can commit 2 hours to study, maybe half an hour is just, we don't even greet each other, right? We don't even hardly greet each other. So just like having a few moments where you're having a face-to-face with somebody, look in somebody's eyes, you recognize what's happening to someone, and there's like that neural circuitry established, then it will bring some confidence that you at least have one other place where you can go to feel understood or held, appreciated. Because I think it's true, we get self-protective because our experience dictates that there are no places that are safe, that there are no places where we won't be judged, that there are no places where there won't be any diverted attention. Especially in a tech age, becomes more vital. And I don't personally see that as anything but Dharma.
Well, you can go to 11, 4 o'clock.
Well, let's dedicate the merit, okay? So first, let me thank you so much for being such gracious host. Sabina and Max and Sue, thank you so much for inviting me and for creating such a lovely environment, non-intimidating and receptive. Thank you all for coming. And those that weren't here tonight, if you know those people, please thank them on my behalf. To tell you the truth, these kind of experiences make my life more meaningful and more enriched. Even though I have two wonderful children that I miss terribly right now, there's no place I'd rather be right now than doing this with you. And I know that you feel that sincerely. I love my work, but my work would be nothing if there weren't interest for it. So given all the possible variables of choices that you have, to be able to do this for me makes my life very, very meaningful. Thank you so much. So let's dedicate the merit together. So do kindly imagine that, or not imagine, but register or recognize that in the course of 3 days together, we've created a vast amount of positive energy reflecting on the deepest teachings that any human being could possibly come into contact with, which are causality and selflessness, and have nothing to do with Buddhism. They have everything to do with being human. And you have spent your time so well critically analyzing your own causality and impregnating in your mind the opportunity to spin to become someone new, not only for your benefit, but for the benefit of others. And as a result of that positive intention and positive energy and investment, think that we have accrued a cachet of positive energy that could be spent and dispersed on mundane pleasures, but we bookmark it and earmark it in the account for awakening for the benefit of others, so that one day we will actualize all our altruistic intentions. We will actually actualize them. We will embody them more fully. And then do kindly portion out a segment for your own health and wellness. May all of you be healthy. And may all of you find inner peace and courage. And may all of you feel safe and held and received and loved. And let's also portion out a portion of the merit for our loved ones. And may each of them feel loved and safe and held, respected. All right? And of course, our teachers, whatever tradition you come from, whoever might be your mentor, may they live long lives, continue to be inspiring figures, continue to preserve the Dharma, whatever teachings they disseminate, and become vessels of benefit for others. And maybe we never be separated from them. And then even the most challenging, and even the strangers, please section off a portion of your merit for them, because without them there would be no objects of compassion. And without compassion, there can be no impetus for enlightenment. May they be well, may they be safe, may their minds transform. Om Ahum. Thank you so much. No, this is the